Arizona Territory, 1885. The wind howled through Ponderosa Pass as rancher Sam Kincaid fought the freezing storm, his son clutching his coat and his little daughter burning with fever yet shivering in the cold. Lost and desperate, he prayed for a miracle and found it in a lonely widow's cabin deep in the woods. Watch till the end to see how a stranger's kindness saved his child and changed all their destinies forever. Tell us where you're watching from, partner. Join our Sleep West family, and let's ride into the story.
The wind howled a lonely tune across the stark, unforgiving expanse of the Arizona Territory. It was late December in the year 1885, and the air bit with a ferocity that seemed to tear the very heat from the blood. Sam Kincaid, a man whose wealth was measured in acres of prime ranch land and head of sturdy cattle, drove his wagon deeper into the Ponderosa Pass forest. Sam wasn't just wealthy, he was a self-made man, granite tough and accustomed to commanding, though his heart carried a permanent unhealed fissure. Beside him, bundled deep in thick woolen blankets, sat his two children. Lily, 5 years old and usually a whirlwind of questions and bright laughter, lay unnaturally still. Across from her, Kit, an earnest 8-year-old with his father's determined jaw, kept a silent, worried vigil. They were far from their prosperous village of Oakhaven, heading to a distant trading post on what had begun as a practical journey, now twisted into a desperate race against the cold. The sky, heavy with the promise of snow, pressed down on the pines. Kit shifted, his gaze locked on his little sister. Her small face was flushed a dangerous crimson, yet her body shook with uncontrollable spasms beneath the heavy wraps. Kit's voice was small but sharp, cutting through the rhythmic creak of the wagon wheels. Sam, his eyes narrowed against the biting wind, barely glanced back. "Hold fast, son. We're nearly through this stretch." "No, Pa. Listen to me," Kit insisted, climbing over the seat to grasp his father's heavy coat sleeve. Lily's burning up, her cheeks are on fire, but she's shaking so hard her teeth are clattering. "We can't keep going, Pa. Not like this." The boy's urgency pierced Sam's preoccupation. He pulled the reins, slowing the sturdy gelding. He climbed down, his boots crunching on the frozen earth, and went to Lily. Her skin was dry and furnace hot, her breath shallow and ragged. A wave of fear, cold and sharp, cut through Sam's usual iron control. The wind alone would be a danger. A fever in this weather was a death sentence. "You're right, son." Sam's voice was rough with realization. "It's too much for her. We need shelter, and we need it now." He looked around the dense, unfamiliar forest. No signs of a cabin, a logging camp, or even a hunter's lean-to. Only the dark, towering pines and the deepening gloom of the afternoon. He was a man who solved problems with money and manpower. Yet here, he was helpless, his riches useless against the elements. "Hold on, little sprout," he murmured to Lily, pulling his own heavy fur-lined cloak around her. He climbed back up, his eyes scanning the tree line, praying for a wisp of smoke or any break in the monotonous forest. As if his desperation had conjured her from the thin air, a figure emerged from the shadows of the trees, a basket hooked over her arm. She was tall, cloaked in a practical patched-up coat, her face framed by a simple hood. She looked no older than 25, yet carried the weary resignation of someone much older. She was returning from a solitary trip to gather medicinal herbs, and what few meager supplies she could afford. "Ma'am, wait!" Sam shouted, his voice swallowed partially by the wind. He quickly tied the reins and rushed towards her, his hat blowing back to reveal his wind-chapped face. The woman stopped, startled, her eyes wide and cautious. In this territory, an unknown man with a rich man's coat was often trouble. "I apologize for stopping you, ma'am," Sam panted, removing his hat, a gesture he rarely offered. "My daughter, she's terribly sick, high fever, shivering. It's no weather for a child in that condition. I don't suppose do you know of any cabin or settlement nearby where we could find a warm hearth?" The woman studied him, then glanced at the wagon, catching sight of the pale little girl. Her initial wariness seemed to melt into a deep, immediate sympathy. You're a good mile from the nearest trading post, mister. And even that's barely a shack, she said, her voice low and steady. My name is Mary. I live just a short walk through the woods. It's not much, but it's warm, and I have a fire going. We need to get that child inside immediately. Mary didn't wait for a reply. She turned and began walking briskly, expecting him to follow. Sam, relieved beyond measure, quickly returned to his wagon. He carefully lifted Lily, wrapping her tight against his chest, and followed Mary with Kit trailing close behind, clutching his father's coattails. Cabin comfort. Mary's cabin was tiny, built of rough-hewn logs, but a comforting plume of smoke curled from its stone chimney. Inside it smelled of wood smoke, pine needles, and dried herbs. Mary immediately cleared a space by the crackling stone fireplace. Lay her down here, she instructed Sam, her hands already moving with purpose. Kit, stand by the fire and warm yourself. You must be frozen. Sam gently placed Lily on a makeshift pallet of blankets, relieved to see the oppressive heat of the cabin. Mary knelt beside the girl, placing a cool hand on her forehead. She began rummaging through a shelf filled with jars. I'll make a mulligan stew and a strong bone broth, Mary said, stirring the embers back to a roaring blaze. She needs warmth and liquid, then a bitter leaf tea to try and break that fever. She worked with quiet, practiced efficiency. Soon the aroma of savory broth and simmering vegetables filled the cabin, a scent of life and comfort. Sam sat back, his powerful frame seeming to shrink with exhaustion and worry. He watched as Mary, without prompting, gently wiped Lily's brow with a cool, damp cloth. You're very kind, ma'am, Sam said, his voice husky. Mary smiled faintly. Just practical, mister. In this territory, we help our neighbors, known or unknown. Now drink this coffee. You look like you've ridden through a blizzard yourself. After a tense hour, Mary coaxed a few spoonfuls of the rich hot broth into Lily's lips. Slowly, miraculously, the high, dangerous flush began to recede. Lily's fever broke, leaving her damp and weak, but the violent shivering subsided. The pale, almost blue tinge to her lips gave way to a faint, healthy pink. Kit, who had been watching Mary with the focused intensity of a child evaluating a stranger, finally relaxed. He sat closer to the fire, watching Mary as she gently braided a loose strand of Lily's hair away from her face. As the late afternoon turned to evening, a sudden, furious roar shook the cabin. The wind outside rose to a terrifying pitch, followed by the vicious drumming of sleet and thick, heavy snow. A blizzard, Mary stated, her face grim. A bad one. You won't be leaving tonight, Mr. Kincaid. Or maybe not even tomorrow. And so it was. The storm raged for 3 days and 3 nights, trapping the rich rancher, his children, and the solitary widow together in the tiny cabin. Don Sullivan. Shared stories. The forced proximity forged an unexpected bond. Sam, for all his business acumen, was clumsy in domestic matters. Mary, however, seemed to possess an endless store of patience and quiet joy, particularly with the children. She fashioned small wooden figures for Kit and taught Lily a simple finger rhyme. She listened to their chatter with genuine interest. The children, in turn, were captivated. For Lily, Mary's presence was the comfort that chased the sickness away. For Kit, Mary's calm, capable manner was a novelty. She treated them not as Sam's precious belongings, but as people. They started calling her Aunt Mary's before Sam could correct them. She reminded them of the warmth and subtle kindness they had lost. Sam watched all of this. He was a man who saw the world in ledgers and contracts. He expected people to want something from him. Yet, Mary only offered help and a quiet grace. He noticed the worn state of her clothes, the bareness of her shelves, and the way she had to hold a pot of soup with a thick cloth because the handle was broken. On the morning of the 4th day, the blizzard finally broke. The world outside was transformed into a silent, blinding expanse of fresh snow. You can travel now, Mary said simply, preparing a final hearty breakfast. The time for departure was somber. Lily threw her arms around Mary's waist, burying her face in the simple woolen dress. Kid hugged her tight, a serious unspoken promise in his eyes to remember her. Sam shook her hand. "Mary, I don't know how to thank you. You saved my daughter's life. You made them feel—" He paused, searching for the right word. "At home." He paid her handsomely for the food and trouble, though he felt the money was a crude, inadequate exchange. As the wagon pulled away, the children, seated on the back bench, twisted around, waving until the tiny cabin disappeared behind the pines. Sam, sitting straight on the driver's seat, did not look back. He drove with his eyes fixed straight ahead, an unusual intensity hardening his expression. The rancher's repayment. The following week, Sam Kincaid returned to the Ponderosa Pass, not alone, but with two of his most skilled ranch hands. He found Mary struggling to chop a thick log, her slight frame straining against the task. "Mr. Kincaid," she exclaimed, surprised, dropping the axe. "What are you doing here?" "I saw a few things when I was here," Sam stated, dismounting. "Your woodshed is barely standing, the roof leaks right over your sleeping area, and your fence line is completely down. These men," he gestured to his workers, "are going to fix it all. They're good carpenters." Mary's face flushed with a mixture of offense and gratitude. "Mr. Kincaid, please. You've already paid me and shown enough kindness. I cannot accept more charity. My late husband, Elias, wouldn't like it." Sam stepped closer, his imposing height shadowing her. "This isn't charity, Mary. This is repayment. You gave shelter to a struggling unknown man and saved his child's life, making my little ones feel like they were home. I repaid debts. It's the only way I know how to keep my conscience clear. Please, let me do this. For the children." He held her gaze, and she finally relented, a tear escaping the corner of her eye. "Very well, Mr. Kincaid. Thank you." Over the next few weeks, Sam brought Lily and Kid out to the cabin often. The children were his excuse, but Sam too found a quiet peace in the rebuilt cabin. They'd bring Mary supplies, fresh game, and always, the children would spend hours with her. During one visit, while the children were playing outside in the crisp air, Mary finally spoke of her past. "My Elias," she began, staring into the flickering hearth. "He died 3 years ago. It was a terrible autumn storm, much like the blizzard that trapped you. He'd gone out to trade a pony, and the river was too high. He was drowned. The villagers of New Hope, they believe I'm tainted. They say it was my fault, that I'm cursed. Even my own livestock, a mare, gave birth to 3 foals, and all died within a month. No one will trade with me or look me in the eye." Her voice cracked slightly. "I've had offers of marriage, Sam, mostly from men who want the small patch of land Elias left behind. But I haven't done it. I promised myself I wouldn't. It feels like a betrayal, like I'd be replacing the man I loved." Sam listened in silence, his eyes fixed on the fire. When she finished, he leaned forward, his elbows resting on his knees. "My wife Clara died 2 years after Lily was born," he said, his voice flat, emotionless. "A sudden sickness that took her in 3 days. Her last words to me were a plea. Find them a kind, true mother, Sam. One who will treat them right. I made that promise, but every woman I've considered, every eligible spinster or widow in Oakhaven, they either wanted my name and property, or they saw my children as an inconvenience. They treat them like they're just part of the furniture." He looked up at her, a rare vulnerability in his eyes. "You're the first person I've met who looked at my children and just saw 2 people who needed love." The short, harsh winter began to wane, and Sam was called to the district court in the nearest town, Saddle Creek, to finalize some ranch deeds. As he approached the courthouse steps, he saw Mary standing on the porch, looking small and defeated, clutching a worn leather satchel. "Mary, what are you doing here?" Sam asked, immediately concerned. Her shoulders slumped. "The local landlord, Mr. Harkness. He's finally filing papers. Elias had a number of debts, mostly for supplies he'd bought on credit, and Harkness bought them up. He's pressuring me to sell my land to him at a fraction of its worth to cover the balance. He's offered a settlement." Her lips curled with distaste. If I can't pay, he'll take the land, and says I can marry him instead. You should have come to me. Told me. Sam insisted, his voice rising in anger. Not at her, but at the injustice. And ask for what, Sam? She asked quietly. You've already saved my home once. Your generosity is immense, but I can't be a burden. I want to stand on my own 2 feet. Sam said nothing more. He walked straight into the clerk's office and began a rapid, intense conversation with his attorney. The next morning, the court hearing began. The small courtroom was packed with curious, critical faces from New Hope and Saddle Creek. Mr. Harkness, a portly, self-satisfied man, was already presenting his case. Mary sat alone, her face pale, but her chin held high. Sam strode in late, the children in tow, and moved to Mary's side. The crowd murmured. The judge, a weary-looking man named Judge Thorne, banged his gavel. When it came time for Mary's defense, Sam rose before her. Your Honor, Sam's voice boomed, silencing the room. I am Sam Kincaid. I am prepared to settle all debts held against the estate of Elias Thorne, and against Mary Thorne, in full immediately. A furious wave of criticism erupted from the villagers, led by Harkness. It's that cursed woman. She'll bring ruin to him. Don't do it, Kincaid. She's a known blight. Judge Thorne hammered his gavel again. Order, Mr. Kincaid. The court appreciates the offer, but I must ask, why would you involve yourself financially with a person about whom such local concerns are widely held? Sam turned to face the room, his eyes blazing with a dangerous intensity that cowed the critics. I will tell you why, Your Honor, and why I don't give a damn about local concerns or baseless superstitions. Sam declared. This woman Mary took me and my children in during the worst blizzard of the year. She didn't ask our names. She didn't ask for payment. She just saw a child suffering and risked her own meager supplies to save her. She nursed my daughter, Lily, back from the brink of death. He then placed a hand on Kit's shoulder and urged Lily gently forward. Ask the children what they think of this cursed woman. Go on, Lily. Lily, emboldened by her father's presence, spoke in a clear, sweet voice. I love Aunt Mary. She's not cursed. She's good. She braids my hair just like my mama used to, and she reads me stories. Kit, serious as always, stepped forward. She's the kindest person I've ever met, Your Honor. She makes the cabin feel like a home. She doesn't treat us like we're in the way. The courtroom fell into an absolute, ringing silence. All the criticisms, the whispered rumors, and the petty condemnations shattered against the genuine, heartfelt testimony of 2 children. Sam looked down at Mary, whose eyes were filled with tears of relief and a fierce, surprising pride. He opened his arms, and the 4 of them, Sam, Mary, Kit, and Lily, embraced right there in the middle of the crowded, silent courtroom. A new beginning. The paperwork was settled. Harkness was paid off, and Mary's land was safe. Sam and his children were preparing to leave, climbing back into the wagon, a lightness in their step they hadn't known for years. Mary walked up to the side of the wagon, placing a hand on Sam's arm. Sam, she said, her voice trembling slightly, but firm. She looked up at him, her eyes bright and resolute. Will you be my husband? Sam froze, his hand tightening on the reins. You've already done the work of a partner, a true partner. For me, she continued, her voice gaining strength. You've saved my home, protected my name, and you've made my life feel safe again. And your children, they need a mother, a real one, and I need them as much as they need me. Tears welled in Sam's eyes, the stone around his heart finally crumbling. He had longed for this, but his earlier memory of her reluctance had held his pride in check. I wanted to ask you, Mary, Sam choked out, the words thick with emotion. I truly did. But you told me, you said you couldn't marry again, that it would feel like replacing Elias. Mary smiled, a radiant, beautiful smile that erased years of hardship. A debt settled is a partnership begun, Sam. And I've realized something. You and your children aren't replacements for what I lost. You are the new life I found. You are the future I never expected to have. A few weeks later, With the last vestiges of winter melting away, Sam and Mary were married simply, quietly, in the small sunlit church in Oakhaven. The only witnesses were Kit and Lily, who stood proudly beside them, clutching hands, finally looking at the world with the security of a complete true family. Sam Kincaid, the rich rancher, had found his true wealth not in land or cattle, but in the heart of a brave, loving woman in a little cabin in the wilderness.